Most people believe blood sugar only rises after eating, but for millions of people over 50, it actually rises while they sleep. Before you do anything else, I need you to try something right now. Place two fingers on the side of your neck, just below your jaw. Now swallow. Feel that? That subtle pulse under your fingertips, that is your blood moving right now. Carrying glucose to your brain, your heart, your nerves, every single cell in your body, for millions of people over 50, something happens to that blood while they sleep. Something quiet. Something most people never notice until the damage is already done. Their blood sugar rises overnight, not because they ate something, not because they did anything wrong. It rises even after 8 or 9 hours without a single bite of food. And almost everyone who experiences this assumes the same thing. That is just what diabetes does, that nothing can be done except stronger medication. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if part of the reason your blood sugar climbs at night is not only about what you eat, but about what your body is no longer being helped to do while you sleep? Because here is something most people have never been told. Your body has a natural system for removing excess glucose. It works at night. It works while you rest. And for many people, that system has quietly stopped working the way it should. Not because it is broken, but because it is no longer being supported. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain changed the way I counsel patients, and it could change the way you think about your blood sugar tonight. My name is Dr. Megan Foster. I have spent more than 24 years working with patients dealing with metabolic disease, circulation problems, and the long term damage that comes from years of poorly controlled blood sugar. And in all that time, one thing has stood out more than almost anything else. People are trying so hard to do everything right. They are avoiding sugar, cutting carbs, skipping fruit, skipping bread, skipping nearly everything they enjoy, following every rule they have been given, and still, their morning numbers are not where they want them. That is one of the most frustrating experiences a person can have. Doing everything they were told to do and still waking up to a number on that glucose meter that makes their heart sink. So, before we go any further, if you've ever checked your blood sugar in the morning and felt that sinking feeling, I want you to type the word yes in the comments right now, because you are not alone. And the fact that you are still here, still looking for answers, that matters. Now, let me tell you what most doctors do not spend enough time explaining. Controlling blood sugar is not only about blocking sugar from coming in. Your body also has systems designed to push excess sugar out. And one of those systems involves an organ that almost nobody connects to blood sugar at all: your kidneys. I know that sounds surprising. Most people think of the kidneys as having to do with water and blood pressure, but the kidneys play a quiet and underappreciated role in glucose balance. And understanding that role is the first step to understanding what I am going to share today. Before we go deeper, I want to mention something quickly. I put together a longevity guide for viewers of this channel. It covers simple daily habits that support healthy blood sugar, circulation, and the body's natural repair systems. Things that are practical, realistic, and backed by genuine research. The link is in the description below, completely free. Now let us continue. Let me take you back for a moment. Think about how you felt 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe you could eat a normal dinner, sleep all the way through the night, and wake up feeling clear and steady. No strange thirst pulling you out of bed. No brain fog sitting on you the moment your alarm went off. No number on that glucose meter that made you feel like you had already failed before the day even started. Something changed. And you may have been told that change was inevitable, that it was just aging, that the body just does this and there is not much to be done about it. But here's what I want you to hear clearly: that change was not inevitable. Not entirely. Yes, aging plays a role. Nobody disputes that. But what most people experience, the gradual worsening of overnight blood sugar control, is not simply the unstoppable march of time. It is usually a combination of metabolic stress, low level chronic inflammation, disrupted sleep, and something deceptively simple. The body's glucose clearing systems are no longer being supported the way they need to be. And here's the hopeful part: some of those systems can be supported again. The body has more capacity to rebalance than most people are ever led to believe. And sometimes a small, consistent habit, introduced at the right time of night, is enough to start that shift. Let me explain how this actually works. And I am going to keep this simple because the science does not need to be complicated to be useful. Think of your bloodstream as a highway. Glucose is the traffic on that highway. Every time you eat, more vehicles enter the road. Carbohydrates break down into glucose and flood into your bloodstream. Insulin acts like a traffic coordinator, directing those glucose molecules off the highway and into your cells where they are converted into energy. When the system is working well, traffic flows smoothly. But when insulin is not as effective as it once was, when cells are not responding properly, when inflammation is disrupting the signaling, too many glucose molecules stay on the highway, they build up. And over time, that chronic excess causes real damage to blood vessels, nerves, and organs. This is the core of what happens in type 2 diabetes and in the years leading up to it. Now, here is where most explanations stop. But there is another part of this story that almost nobody talks about, and it involves your liver. Most people know the liver as something that processes alcohol or helps with digestion. What most people do not know is that the liver is actually one of the primary glucose factories in your entire body. Here is what happens: your liver stores glucose in a form called glycogen. Think of it as a reserve fuel tank. During the day, when you eat, that tank fills up. But at night, when you have not eaten for several hours, your liver begins releasing stored glucose back into your bloodstream to keep your brain and organs fueled while you sleep. This process is completely normal. The body needs a baseline supply of glucose even at rest. But here's the problem that millions of people do not know about. In people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, the liver loses its ability to accurately read the signals that should tell it when to stop releasing glucose. The feedback loop breaks down. So instead of releasing a careful, measured amount overnight, the liver overshoots. It keeps releasing glucose into the bloodstream even when blood sugar is already elevated, because the signal that should say stop has gone quiet. This is called hepatic glucose overproduction. It is one of the primary drivers of elevated fasting blood sugar in the morning, and it has almost nothing to do with what you ate for dinner. Understanding this changes everything, because it means that for many people, the battle for morning blood sugar is not won at the dinner table. It is won by supporting the signaling environment inside the body that tells the liver how to behave overnight. And that brings us directly to why certain natural compounds taken at night can have a meaningful impact on that morning number. There is something else happening alongside that liver dysfunction that most people are never told about, and it affects the blood vessels themselves. When blood glucose stays elevated for extended periods, it reacts with proteins in the bloodstream through a process called glycation. Glucose essentially sticks to proteins, including the proteins that make up the walls of your blood vessels, and damages them. The blood vessel walls become stiffer, more inflamed, and less able to expand and contract the way healthy vessels should. This is why high blood sugar over time damages the eyes, the kidneys, the nerves in the feet, and the heart. These organs all depend on tiny, delicate blood vessels, and those vessels are the first to show the damage from years of glycation. Here is why this matters for your morning reading specifically. When blood vessels become stiffer and more inflamed, the circulation to metabolically active tissues, including the muscles and organs that absorb glucose, becomes less efficient. Glucose delivery and uptake becomes sluggish. Blood sugar stays elevated longer after each glucose release event. The antioxidant compounds in the nighttime combination I am going to describe directly counter this glycation and inflammation process. They are not just reducing blood sugar numbers. They are protecting the infrastructure through which glucose moves. Now, let me explain the other system I mentioned, the kidneys, because these two things work together. Your kidneys filter your blood continuously, every minute of every day. Under the right conditions, when blood sugar rises above a certain level, the kidneys have the ability to pull some of that excess glucose out of the blood and pass it out of the body through urine. This is a natural overflow valve. The problem is that this threshold, the level at which the kidneys decide to act, it can shift under chronic metabolic stress. It rises. The kidneys become less responsive to high glucose, and the overflow valve barely opens. So glucose that should be cleared stays in the blood. Interestingly, some of the newest and most effective diabetes medications work specifically by resetting this kidney threshold, forcing the kidneys to clear more glucose even when blood sugar is not critically high. These medications have produced impressive outcomes in clinical trials. I mention this because it illustrates something important. Your kidneys are a genuine and meaningful part of your glucose regulation system, not just a bystander. Supporting the conditions that allow them to do that job is real metabolic strategy. And certain plant compounds have been found to support exactly that kind of broad metabolic environment: liver signaling, kidney function, insulin sensitivity, and inflammation all at once. That is the power of the combination I'm going to describe. Before I get into the three ingredients, I want to briefly explain something called the dawn phenomenon, because it is relevant to a lot of people watching this, and most of them have never heard it explained clearly. If you have ever noticed that your blood sugar is actually higher when you wake up than it was when you went to bed, even after hours with no food, the dawn phenomenon may be part of the explanation. Here is what happens. In the early morning hours, typically between 3 and 8 in the morning, your body begins preparing you to wake up. It releases a surge of hormones, cortisol, growth hormone, adrenaline, that are designed to get you alert and ready for the day. One of the effects of these hormones is to trigger your liver to release glucose into the bloodstream as morning fuel. In people without diabetes, insulin rises to meet this glucose surge and the blood sugar stays in a healthy range. In people with insulin resistance, the insulin response is not strong enough or fast enough, and blood sugar climbs before the person has even opened their eyes. This is not a character flaw, it is a physiological process. And knowing about it matters because it means that your morning reading is not simply a reflection of what you ate yesterday. It is a reflection of how well your liver responded to those pre dawn hormonal signals. Supporting your body's sensitivity to those signals, which is exactly what the ingredients I'm going to describe help do, is a direct strategy for improving that morning number. There is one more area I want to touch on before we get to the ingredients themselves because it has become one of the most exciting areas of research in metabolic health over the last decade: your gut. Specifically, the trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive system, collectively called the gut microbiome. Research has now established a clear link between the composition of your gut bacteria and your blood sugar regulation. Here's how it works. Certain beneficial bacteria in the gut produce short chain fatty acids when they ferment dietary fiber. These short chain fatty acids have direct effects on insulin sensitivity and on the signals the gut sends to the liver about glucose management. When the gut microbiome is healthy and diverse, rich in beneficial bacteria, these signals support better insulin sensitivity and more accurate liver glucose regulation. When the microbiome is disrupted, which happens with processed food diets, antibiotic use, and chronic stress, those beneficial signals are weaker and blood sugar regulation suffers. This is why what you eat affects far more than just the calories and carbohydrates entering your system. It affects the bacterial environment that shapes your metabolic signaling. Moringa, interestingly, contains compounds that appear to act as a prebiotic, feeding and supporting beneficial gut bacteria. This is yet another pathway through which moringa contributes to the overall metabolic picture. Supporting the gut environment is supporting the glucose regulation environment. Practical implication: eating a variety of vegetables, legumes, and whole foods alongside this nighttime routine gives the gut bacteria what they need to support your metabolic health from the inside out. Now, let us talk about the three ingredients. The third ingredient is one you have almost certainly heard of. You probably have it in your kitchen right now. But I would wager that most people have no idea how deeply it has been studied for blood sugar regulation specifically. Turmeric. More precisely, a compound inside turmeric called curcumin. Curcumin has been studied extensively for its effect on a condition called insulin resistance, the core problem in type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance is when your cells stop responding normally to insulin signal. Insulin knocks on the cellular door and says, let this glucose in, and the cells do not answer properly. Glucose stays in the bloodstream instead of entering the cells where it belongs. What curcumin appears to do is target the inflammatory pathways that contribute to that resistance. Chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind that does not cause obvious symptoms, but quietly disrupts your body's signaling systems, is one of the primary drivers of insulin resistance. And curcumin has shown meaningful ability to reduce specific inflammatory markers, including something called NFKB, which is a key trigger of metabolic inflammation. When that inflammatory signaling decreases, insulin receptors begin functioning more effectively. They respond more readily to insulin, and when insulin signaling improves, glucose has an easier time moving out of the bloodstream and into the cells. There is also evidence that curcumin has a direct protective effect on the beta cells of the pancreas, the cells responsible for producing insulin in the first place. Chronic high blood sugar and chronic inflammation gradually damage these cells over time, reducing their ability to produce adequate insulin. Curcumin's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties appear to offer some degree of protection to these cells. One practical note that most people miss: curcumin on its own is not well absorbed by the body. A large portion passes through your digestive system without reaching your bloodstream where it can do its work. This is why a small pinch of black pepper alongside turmeric makes a real difference. A compound in black pepper called piperine has been shown to increase curcumin absorption dramatically. So, when you take this combination, always include that pinch of black pepper. Now, the second ingredient, and this one has more published clinical research behind it than almost any other natural compound studied for blood sugar: Ceylon cinnamon. Here's something important that most people are never told. The cinnamon you buy at most grocery stores is almost certainly cassia cinnamon, the common variety from China and Vietnam. In small culinary amounts, it is fine. But when researchers study cinnamon for metabolic effects, the variety that consistently shows the strongest results is Ceylon cinnamon from Sri Lanka. Ceylon cinnamon contains polyphenols, a class of plant compounds that appear to act in the body in a way that mimics insulin, meaning they can help signal your cells to absorb glucose even when insulin itself is not functioning at full efficiency. This is a remarkable and underappreciated property. Beyond that, Ceylon cinnamon appears to slow the rate at which the stomach empties after a meal. When food moves more slowly out of the stomach and into the small intestine, carbohydrates are absorbed more gradually, glucose enters the bloodstream more slowly, and the post-meal blood sugar spike is lower and flatter. This slower, smoother glucose curve means your body has more time to manage the rise, and less residual glucose is left circulating when you go to sleep. This effect on stomach emptying rate is one of the reasons that Ceylon cinnamon has repeatedly shown an ability to reduce fasting morning glucose in clinical trials. The evening's glucose curve is more manageable, the liver has less to work with overnight, and the morning number reflects that. The research is consistent enough that mainstream nutrition journals take it seriously, and the dose needed is modest. Half a teaspoon per day is sufficient to produce a meaningful metabolic effect over weeks of consistent use. And now we get to the ingredient that I find genuinely fascinating, the one that surprised me most when I first seriously looked into the science behind it: Moringa oleifera. Moringa has been used in traditional medicine across South Asia, Africa, and Latin America for centuries. It has been called the miracle tree, not just because of its blood sugar effects, but because the nutritional density of its leaves is remarkable. More vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and a protein profile unusual for a plant leaf. But for our purposes today, what matters most is what moringa does inside the metabolic system. Moringa leaves contain a compound called chlorogenic acid, the same compound found in high concentrations in green coffee beans, which has been studied for its glucose effects. Chlorogenic acid appears to inhibit specific enzymes in the gut that break down complex carbohydrates into glucose. When that enzyme activity is reduced, carbohydrates are digested more slowly, glucose is released into the bloodstream more gradually, and the blood sugar rise after a meal is blunted. Moringa also contains compounds called isothiocyanates, which have been shown in research to improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular level, specifically by influencing the internal pathways that cells use to respond to insulin signal. And there is a third mechanism that is particularly relevant for overnight blood sugar. Moringa appears to reduce oxidative stress in the liver. Remember the liver overproduction problem I described earlier, where the liver keeps releasing glucose at night because its feedback signals are broken? A significant contributor to that broken signaling is oxidative damage to liver cells. Moringa's antioxidant compounds appear to support healthier liver cell function, which means the liver's overnight glucose regulation may become more precise over time with consistent moringa use. That is three distinct mechanisms working simultaneously: slower carbohydrate absorption, improved cellular insulin response, and better liver signaling overnight. This is why moringa earns its place as the most important ingredient in this combination, not just a supporting player. A study published in the Journal of Food Science and Human Wellness examined moringa supplementation in people with type 2 diabetes and found meaningful improvements in fasting glucose levels with consistent use over several weeks. People who use moringa regularly often describe something that aligns with this. Their morning numbers become more predictable, less spiking that seems to come from nowhere, a calmer, narrower range day after day. And that stability, that consistency, is one of the most valuable things a person with elevated blood sugar can achieve. Now, I want to talk about timing because this is a piece of the puzzle that most people completely overlook. When you take something, matters just as much as what you take. Your body runs on internal biological rhythms called circadian rhythms, 24-hour cycles that govern when certain processes are active, when hormones are released, when repair happens, and when certain organs are most responsive to input. Your metabolic processes follow these rhythms precisely. Insulin sensitivity, for example, is actually higher in the morning and lower in the evening. This is why the same meal eaten at 7 in the morning produces a smaller blood sugar rise than the same meal eaten at 7 in the evening. Your body is literally more equipped to handle glucose earlier in the day than later. This also means that the compounds you take later in the day, and specifically in the hour before sleep, enter a body that is transitioning into its overnight regulatory mode. The liver is adjusting its overnight glucose output. The pancreas is recalibrating. The muscles are in recovery and nutrient absorption. The gut is completing its digestive work. When you give your body moringa, Ceylon cinnamon, and turmeric during this transition window, those compounds are present during the period when your overnight glucose patterns are actively being set. They are not working in isolation. They are working with a system that is already in the middle of exactly the processes they are designed to support. This is the principle behind chronobiology applied to nutrition, timing nutritional support to align with the body's own biological programs. And the research increasingly supports the idea that the same compounds can have meaningfully different effects depending on when they are taken relative to the body's daily clock. 30 to 60 minutes before sleep is the window. That is when these three compounds can do the most relevant work. Now, let me give you the exact preparation because the simplicity of it surprises most people. In a cup of warm water, or an herbal tea if you prefer, you're going to combine 1 teaspoon of moringa leaf powder, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon. Make sure the label specifically says Ceylon and a small pinch of turmeric powder. Then add a small pinch of black pepper. Stir everything well and drink it warm 30 to 60 minutes before you go to sleep. That is it. That is the complete routine. No complex protocol. No handful of pills. Just a warm drink before bed, made from ingredients that cost very little and are increasingly available in mainstream stores. I want to be completely honest about what this is and what it is not. This is not a cure. It is not a replacement for prescribed medication. If your doctor has you on medication for blood sugar, that stays in place. Please do not adjust it without medical guidance. What this is, what the research genuinely suggests, is meaningful metabolic support. A way of giving your body three carefully chosen, scientifically studied compounds at the exact time when your overnight glucose regulation is most active. It is support. It is a favorable condition created for your body's own systems to work better. The people who see real results are not the ones who try it for 2 days. They are the ones who commit to 30 days of consistent evening use, track their fasting morning numbers throughout, and let the trend tell the story. Let me talk briefly about something that I think often gets overlooked in discussions about blood sugar, the role of magnesium. This is not one of the three ingredients in the nighttime drink, but it is worth understanding because it connects to everything I have described. Magnesium is involved in more than 300 biochemical reactions in the human body. Among them, it plays a direct role in insulin signaling, specifically in helping the insulin receptor do its job when insulin knocks on the cellular door. Without adequate magnesium, insulin signaling is impaired even when insulin itself is present in normal amounts. Here is the alarming part. Research suggests that a significant portion of people with type 2 diabetes are deficient in magnesium, and high blood sugar itself causes the kidneys to excrete more magnesium in urine, meaning the higher your blood sugar, the more magnesium you lose, and the worse your insulin signaling becomes. It is a feedback loop that works against you. Dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, almonds, and black beans are among the best food sources of magnesium. Simply ensuring adequate magnesium through diet or supplementation is a step many metabolically compromised patients overlook entirely, and it can have a real effect on insulin function. I raise this because one of the things moringa does as a nutritionally dense plant is contribute a meaningful amount of magnesium alongside its other active compounds. This is another reason the combination I described is more than the sum of its parts. Now I want to spend a few minutes on something that I genuinely believe is one of the most underappreciated tools available to anyone managing blood sugar. And it costs nothing: the post meal walk. The post meal, there is a mechanism in your muscles called non insulin mediated glucose uptake. What this means in plain language is that when your muscles are actively contracting, when you are walking, moving, climbing stairs, they absorb glucose from the bloodstream directly without needing insulin to trigger that absorption. This is a completely separate pathway from the insulin dependent pathway that is impaired in diabetes and prediabetes. And it works regardless of your insulin sensitivity. Your muscles do not need insulin's help when they are moving. They take glucose in on their own. The practical implication is significant. A 10 to 15-minute walk within an hour of finishing your evening meal can reduce the post-meal blood sugar spike by a meaningful amount. Research has measured this effect repeatedly, and the results are consistent. Even slow, relaxed walking, not exercise in any intense sense, activates enough muscle mass to make a difference. When your post-dinner glucose curve is lower and flatter, there is less residual glucose circulating when you go to sleep. Less for the liver to manage overnight, less for the dawn phenomenon to push higher. And the morning number reflects all of that. This habit, combined with the nighttime drink, creates a compounding effect. The walk lowers the starting point. The drink supports the overnight regulation. And morning after morning, the pattern shifts. Sleep itself deserves more attention than it usually gets in metabolic health conversations. I mentioned the cortisol connection earlier. That poor sleep elevates cortisol, and cortisol drives the liver to release glucose. But the relationship between sleep and blood sugar goes even deeper than that. During deep sleep, your body enters its most active period of cellular repair. Growth hormone is released in its largest daily pulse. Inflammation markers in the blood drop. The immune system does targeted work. And the brain consolidates memories and processes the metabolic signals from the day. When sleep is cut short or fragmented, all of these processes are interrupted. Growth hormone release drops sharply. Inflammation markers rise. And crucially, the sensitivity of your cells to insulin decreases in a measurable way the following day. Studies have shown that a single night of poor sleep can reduce insulin sensitivity the next day by a meaningful percentage, enough to noticeably affect your glucose numbers. And chronically poor sleep over weeks and months is one of the most consistent predictors of worsening metabolic health that I see in my clinical practice. If you are someone who struggles with sleep quality, that is worth addressing as a metabolic issue, not just a comfort issue. Simple practices like keeping a consistent sleep and wake schedule, keeping your bedroom cool and dark, and avoiding bright screens in the hour before bed have real, measurable effects on sleep quality, and therefore on blood sugar the following morning. The nighttime drink I described also plays a small role here. Warm liquids before bed are associated with a calming of the nervous system. Herbal teas, in particular, have been studied for mild relaxation effects. And better sleep quality amplifies everything else you're doing for your blood sugar. I want to also address the emotional dimension of living with elevated blood sugar, because I do not think this gets acknowledged nearly enough in clinical conversations. Checking your glucose every morning and seeing a number that discourages you takes a toll. Over weeks and months and years, it quietly erodes confidence. It creates a baseline of anxiety that follows people through their days. It makes people feel like they are failing, even when they are genuinely trying hard. I have sat with patients who were ashamed of their numbers, who apologized to me as if their blood sugar reading was a moral failing, who had stopped checking their meters altogether because the numbers were too discouraging to face. Your blood sugar number is not a reflection of your worth. It is not a measure of your discipline or your effort. It is a physiological measurement in a body that is doing its absolute best under difficult circumstances. Circumstances that include genetics, decades of dietary environment, stress, sleep deprivation, and a food landscape that is working against most people. The fatigue you feel some mornings is real. The frustration is real. The desire for things to be different is real. And here's what I want you to hold on to. The body's capacity to rebalance is also real. I have watched patients in their 60s and 70s move their fasting glucose numbers meaningfully, not through extreme interventions, not through suffering, but through consistent, intelligent, modest support applied night after night over months. The changes were not overnight, but they were real and they were sustainable because they came from real metabolic support rather than temporary restriction. Your story with your blood sugar is not finished. The number you saw this morning is a data point, not a verdict. Let me now give you the full practical framework, the complete 30-day protocol. Every evening, 30 to 60 minutes before you go to sleep, prepare your nighttime drink. 1 teaspoon of moringa leaf powder, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, Ceylon specifically, a small pinch of turmeric, a small pinch of black pepper, warm water or herbal tea. Stir and drink. Alongside that drink, try to take a 10 to 15-minute walk after dinner. Not a workout, a walk. Slow is fine. The goal is to activate muscle glucose uptake during the post-meal window. Make your sleep environment as favorable as possible. Consistent bedtime, cool room, minimal screen light in the final hour before sleep. Every morning, check your fasting glucose at the same time before eating or drinking anything and write that number down. Keep a simple log. At 30 days, review the log. Do not evaluate individual mornings. Evaluate the trend. Is the average moving down? Is the range narrowing? Are the unexplained spikes becoming less frequent? That trend line is the real story. And in my experience, 30 days of genuine consistency reveals it clearly. Let me answer a few questions I know are on people's minds. Can you take this combination if you are already on metformin or other diabetes medication? In most cases, yes, but inform your prescribing doctor. These are food based compounds, but their consistent use may contribute to lower blood sugar. If your medication is also lowering blood sugar, your doctor may want to monitor your numbers more closely in the first few weeks. Where do you find moringa leaf powder? It is available in health food stores, online retailers, and increasingly in mainstream grocery stores. Look for a product that is pure moringa leaf powder with no added ingredients. The color should be a deep, vivid green that indicates freshness and potency. What if you do not like the taste? The flavor is earthy and slightly green. Adding it to a mildly flavored herbal tea rather than plain water makes it more pleasant for most people. Some people add a small amount of ginger, which also has modest blood sugar supporting properties and improves the flavor considerably. Can you add other things to this drink? Keep the core combination intact rather than layering in more and more ingredients. Ginger is a reasonable addition. Beyond that, simplicity is more powerful than complexity here. How do you know if it is working? The most direct measure is your fasting morning glucose over time. But there are other signals worth watching: more consistent energy through the morning, reduced nighttime thirst, and a general improvement in how steady you feel throughout the day. These are real indicators that your overnight glucose regulation is improving. I want to spend a moment on something that most people underestimate completely: the effect of chronic stress on blood sugar. When you experience stress, whether physical or emotional, your body releases cortisol. This is the same hormone released before dawn that I described earlier. And cortisol has a direct effect on blood sugar. It tells the liver to release glucose into the bloodstream as emergency fuel. This was a brilliant evolutionary design for our ancestors facing physical threats. The problem is that modern stress, financial worry, relationship conflict, work pressure, anxiety triggers the same cortisol response. But unlike our ancestors who then ran or fought and burned that glucose through physical activity, most of us sit with that elevated blood sugar as we stare at a screen or lie awake at night. Chronically elevated cortisol from chronic stress is a genuine and underappreciated driver of elevated blood sugar in many people. Not diet, not lack of willpower, stress. This is one of the reasons that evening habits which calm the nervous system, a warm drink, a slow walk, a consistent bedtime, minimal screens, are metabolic interventions, not just comfort rituals. They directly reduce the cortisol environment your body takes into the night. And a lower cortisol environment overnight means a liver that is calmer about how much glucose it releases. The nighttime drink contributes to this. Warm liquids before bed have a gentle calming effect on the nervous system. Herbal teas have been studied for mild relaxation properties, and the act of having a consistent, intentional evening ritual itself signals to the nervous system that the day is ending and it is safe to downregulate. These are not small things. The metabolic environment your body enters at sleep is shaped by everything in the hour before you close your eyes. The research on these three compounds continues to develop. New studies are published regularly that refine our understanding of how they work, in what populations they are most effective, and how they interact with different medications and metabolic conditions. The science is not static, it is growing. What I can tell you with confidence today is that Moringa, Ceylon cinnamon, and turmeric have individually demonstrated meaningful effects on blood sugar regulation through multiple peer reviewed studies. Their combination, taken at night when metabolic regulation is most active, creates a supportive environment for the overnight processes that determine your morning number. This is not magic. This is not a miracle. This is practical nutritional support applied intelligently with an understanding of how the body's glucose systems actually work. The people who benefit most from this are the people who understand what they are doing and why, who see this as one component of a thoughtful approach to metabolic health, not a standalone cure. Used that way, it is a genuinely valuable habit. In the next video, I am going to explain something that most people with elevated blood sugar do right after dinner, something they believe is completely harmless or even beneficial, that quietly makes their morning glucose worse night after night. Almost nobody specifically warns them about this, and once you understand what it is and the mechanism behind it, you will not be able to unknow it. If you want to see that video when it goes up, subscribing is the simplest way to make sure you do not miss it. And if you would like to look at the longevity guide I mentioned at the start, with practical everyday habits that support metabolic health over the long term, you will find the link in the description below. Thank you genuinely for watching this through. It tells me that you are serious about understanding what is happening in your body and what you can actually do about it, and quite not just what to avoid, but what to actively support. That is the right approach. That is the approach that produces real lasting change. Take care of yourself tonight. I will see you in the next video.